Hello, this is Patrick Barnard in Montreal. It is the evening of January 27, 2025, and I'm starting something a bit new on social media. Quite a time ago, more than 20 years ago, I was on Canada's Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, its radio service, and I used to do something called the International Press Review. That was before the web, before the electronic world that we live in today. I used to go out in Montreal and buy Italian and Spanish newspapers and give a kind of review for people every week on local radio in Montreal, and it was syndicated, the International Press Review. So now I'm going to do one for social media. Same sort of thing. We'll see how it goes. If you're interested in some of the details that I will be mentioning in this International Press Review, get in touch with me and I will try to tell you about some of the sources that I will be using. Now, what I'm going to talk about today, it's centered on an article, front page article in this newspaper, the Financial Times. The Financial Times is conservative might be the wrong word. A status quo financial paper, probably the most famous financial paper in the English-speaking world. One of the very important writers for the paper has had an email interchange with me. I know for a fact that about 4 or 5 of the major writers for the Financial Times are very, very worried about Donald Trump and his presidency. They won't say that in public, but that is what they feel. Now, in the last, I would say 3 weeks, there's been some amazing articles in the paper. One of the first of these articles indicated that Elon Musk had revealed to a number of sources that he seriously wanted to remove the British Prime Minister from his office. That's Mr. Starmer, to take him out, as it were. I was actually shocked when I read this, because I'm a very old guy now, and my memories go back to the Truman period. I do not remember any American politicians behaving in this way. So I'm going to focus this press review on one article in the Financial Times weekend paper, which is one that an edition that many people read around the world. The headline is "Trump in fiery call with Danish Premier over buying Greenland." This is a telephone call that Donald Trump had last week with the Danish Premier. She's a very interesting woman called Mette Frederiksen, and the conversation lasted 45 minutes. It was widely recorded as being a very, very unpleasant conversation. The Prime Minister of Denmark told Donald Trump in no uncertain terms that Greenland was not, is not, will not be for sale. And that really filled Trump with ire. I'm going to read you the first couple of paragraphs of this story because it's important. So here we go. I'm reading the paper. Donald Trump insisted he was serious in his determination to take over Greenland in a fiery telephone call with the Danish Prime Minister, according to senior European officials. The U.S. President spoke to Mette Frederiksen, the Danish Premier, for about 45 minutes last week. The White House has not commented on the call. This was an extraordinary event. It was very widely reported, and Trump was also quoted subsequently, very shortly afterwards, on Air Force One as saying that he was serious in wanting the United States to acquire Greenland. He's also spoken about the Panama Canal and about Canada. And in his relations with various foreign countries, he's even gone so far as to suggest that military force might be used. This is a very serious issue for Europeans. That's why the French and German leaders warned the Americans that this was no laughing matter. The Danes have been very, very upset by it. Some right-wing Danish economists have said, well, this will be a good deal for us, but most Danes are very, very worried. Just today, this is January 27th, it was announced on the news that Denmark will be spending several $billion more for ice-breaking kind of boats, also drones, in a renewed effort to assert its sovereignty, because Greenland is a territory of Denmark. It's also a place where there's a budding independence movement, but the leaders of that movement have indicated that they, under no circumstances, wish to be part of the United States. Donald Trump's son went there, made a lot of noise about it, and there's an important sideline to this story which I'm going to tell you about. Now, one of the documents that I have here is written by a man called Ricardo Duran Fernandez. He's a Mexican political scientist, and the article that he's written is from a Monterey business school, and it's called North America's Geopolitical and Economic Playbook Under Trump's Second Term. I thought this was here it is, I'm holding it in my hand. I thought it was a very good article, and basically what Professor Duran says is something that was also written about in some considerable length by Michael Ignatieff, a Canadian intellectual, former leader of the Liberal Party here, who said that the world was seriously changing under Trump, that Trump was animated by a view of the world that sees it as a game of power politics, and that the old liberal order would be vanishing under Trump and the view that he was promoting. Now, Professor Duran, that's the Mexican political scientist that I've just mentioned, he thinks the same kind of thing is happening. And he uses ideas from geopolitics, very, very famous ideas from the last century, that have to do with seeing the world as a kind of competition of huge blocks involving Eurasia, the Americas, and Africa. And what Duran sees happening is that the United States is indeed in a defensive kind of posture, acting very aggressively because it wants to cement its hold over the Americas. And it wants to present a bloc, a very powerful bloc, political bloc, against China. And that it's China, it's the American fear of China that is behind all of these strange activities that Mr. Trump is carrying out. Now, in his essay, Duran points out that the Trump administration are very concerned by what you might call the choke points of power in the Americas. That's the Arctic, because the climate change is bringing an accessibility to the Arctic that in some ways is very frightening, because there's a huge competition that's looming over the Arctic's resources. Canada has a claim to a huge portion of the Arctic, but has really not done a very good job of exercising its own sovereignty. So the choke points in the Americas, according to Professor Duran, are the Arctic, the Panama Canal, Mexico, and Canada. And these are precisely the areas where we see Trump exercising his bullying pressure. And that's particularly true in the last week or so in Greenland. He's actually serious about acquiring Greenland. That's a very serious issue because Denmark exercises sovereignty for the moment in Greenland. Denmark is a member of NATO. NATO's Clause 5 makes it a requirement that all members of NATO must come to the aid of any member that is attacked in any way. This might account for the strange, unrealistic demands that Trump has been making, that all Western European countries spend 5% of their GDP on defense. An impossible target, really. It's possible, it has been suggested in the Canadian press, that Mr. Trump would like to see the Europeans fail to meet his targets, and that would give him an excuse for withdrawing from NATO. Now, that is not likely to happen anytime soon, But if, for example, Trump came to the point of actually exercising military force against Greenland, a nearly an impossible thought, but let's say that happened, then it would be much better for the United States to be outside of NATO. And that would make Denmark a possible antagonist and not a NATO ally. In any case, what does all of this mean? It means the United States, for the moment, is very busy antagonizing all its allies, its Western European and continental allies in its sphere of interest. Mr. Duran has a vision of the future that actually is troubling. He seems to think it'll work out. I believe the contradictions he points to between this power thrust of the Trump administration and its real economic and political interests, I believe that contradiction is very, very profound and will cause us all enormous trouble, including people in the United States. This is Patrick Barnard for the International Press Review.